Okay, so this is Springsteen's Born to Run. It's number 20 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, also ranking number 3 in 1975 and number 68 of all time. It is Springsteen's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, and it comes in at number 21 in Rolling Stone's list.
Wow, okay.
It's also listed in the National Recording Registry of Historic Recordings. So the record was recorded for over a long period of time, from May 1974 through July of 1975, finally being released on August 25th, 1975. It's Springsteen's third studio album. It did sell very well, and it was very critically acclaimed. Peaked number 3 on the Billboard charts. It yielded 2 singles, Born to Run and 10th Avenue Freeze Out. And some of the main members of the E Street Band that contributed to this record were Clarence Clemons on saxophone, Roy Battan on piano, Gary Tallent on bass, and Max Weinberg on drums. Danny Federici and Stevie Van Zandt also contributed nominally to the record as well. They were future staples to the E Street Band. And a little history about Bruce Springsteen. So he was born Bruce Frederick Joseph Springsteen on September 23rd, 1949 in Long Branch, New Jersey. His father, Douglas, was a bus driver, and his mother, Adele Ann, was a secretary. She was actually the primary breadwinner of the family. His father was, he would later find out that he suffered from mental illness. And he also had Springsteen had 2 younger sisters, Virginia and Pamela. He grew up Catholic and attended a Catholic school in Freehold, New Jersey, where he drove the nuns crazy due to his rebellious nature, and was a behavioral issue in school. But he did love music, grew up listening to Frank Sinatra on the radio, and like many others of the time, he was very influenced when he saw Elvis and the Beatles play on Ed Sullivan. After seeing the Beatles play on Ed Sullivan in 1964, he went out and bought a guitar for $18.95, and he started playing in a band called The Rogues. John, what do you know about Freehold, New Jersey? Do you have any
Well, it's
tidbits
about 25
Freehold?
minutes from where I grew up, so
Okay.
it's a blue-collar town. It's in the area of New Jersey that you would call Central Jersey. It's a little further up in Central Jersey than there are some people that think Central Jersey doesn't exist, but I'm here to tell you that it does exist. So it's a distinct. I think it's a distinct culture. Sort of, it's not quite as ethnic as like North Jersey, right? Historically. White working class, I would say, is a good way to describe it, although not entirely. That's the general gist of Freehold. It's a little bit of a different town now than it was when Springsteen was there, because it was definitely sort of the stereotypical, New Jersey, not a factory town necessarily, but like a plant town,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so, he went to Freehold High School, didn't fit in well there either. He was described as, quote, a loner who wanted nothing more than to play his guitar. And he kept playing that guitar with a couple of other bands, eventually graduating in 1967 and briefly attending Ocean County College, but dropping out soon after enrolling. His draft number was called, but when he was 19, but he failed his physical, so that prevented him from going to Vietnam. He began playing with a new band called Steel Mill, and that's where Danny Federici and Stevie Van Zandt joined in with him. And then they started playing more gigs in the Jersey Shore, but also ventured outside of Jersey, playing various parts of the country, including Virginia Beach, Nashville, and various parts of California, and particularly started drawing more crowds in California. Go ahead.
I should probably mention Freehold's unique spot, too. It's very close to the shore, but it's also really close to, like, Staten Island. Like it's like the weird thing of New Jersey where you can be close to lots of things. So you're in Central Jersey, but you're also near the beach or the shore, as anybody from Jersey would say. But you're also near the Staten Island part of New York, but you're further up via the train to the rest of New York. So this might mean nothing to anybody else, but yeah, it's Freehold's in kind of
I'm looking it up.
It's an interesting spot to be in. It's Monmouth County is an interesting spot to be in New Jersey. So anyway, a little more context there.
Thanks, John. So music critic Philip Elwood around this time gave a glowing assessment of Steel Mill, saying, quote, "I have never been so overwhelmed by a totally unknown talent," unquote. Springsteen eventually catches the attention of manager Mike Appel, who brought him to the attention of John Hammond, who was a talent scout at Columbia Records. And Hammond auditioned Springsteen in '72, and then he was shortly signed by Clive Davis after that. And that's when they formed the E Street Band to record the first album, which was called Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. This was released in January of 1973, and at this point he also becomes known as the Boss, as he collected and divided out the band's nightly pay. Sales of this album were slow, but he started drawing comparisons to Dylan due to his lyrical style, which is something that we did talk about when we covered the second album a couple weeks ago. Music critic Lester Bangs, John, I was thinking of you when I read this. He wrote in Cream in 1975 that when Springsteen's first album was released, quote, "Many of us dismissed it. He wrote like Bob Dylan and Van Morrison, sang like Van Morrison and Robbie Robertson, and led a band that sounded like Van Morrison's." So a lot of Van Morrison references
I
there.
hadn't thought of Robbie Roberts. That's an interesting one. But that was definitely my takeaway from that album, sure.
So he released the second album, Wild the Industry and the E Street Shuffle, in September of 1973 to critical acclaim, but again, the sales were slow. And this is when John Landau, music critic John Landau, saw a performance in 1974 of a Springsteen show, and he wrote at that time, quote, I saw rock and roll's future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. And on a night when I needed to feel young, he made me feel like I was hearing music for the very first time. So for some reason, Springsteen, this was, Josh, you talked about how Supertramp's The Crime of the Century was their make it or break it album. This is very much the case for Born to Run. For some reason, Springsteen was given a very large budget and a long time to record this record, which he took full advantage of. He went into grand ideas for an epic album with a wall of sound production style. And he ditched the references to New Jersey, which he was talking a lot about in his first couple albums, and he wanted to make a more universal record, which took 14 months to record. The title track itself took 6 months to record.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was frustrated during the recording, saying that he heard sounds in his head that he could not explain to the others in the studio. So there was a lot of frustration going on, a lot of long nights, sometimes 24-hour days of just recording in the studio. The album is known for the use of introductions to set the tone for each song. And Springsteen said he wanted the album to sound like Roy Orbison singing Bob Dylan, produced by Phil Spector. So during the recording, he did bring in John Landau to help produce, and Landau actually helped move them to a better studio in New York. And he also brought in Jimmy Iovine to engineer the album. I don't know if we've talked about Jimmy Iovine yet in Combing the Stats.
I don't think yet, no.
Yeah, we're certainly going to be talking about him a lot in the years to come, but this is one of the first projects that he worked on. This actually was the beginning of the end of Springsteen's relationship with his original manager, Mike Appel. John Landau would eventually take on that role. So there are a couple of other changes in the group. There was a departure of two members of the E Street Band, drummer Ernest Carter and pianist David Sanctius. Both left during the recording to form a jazz fusion band called Tone, but both of them did make their mark on this record because they are the ones playing on the title track, Born to Run. Instead, in their place, they brought in...
Which, by the way, the drums sound totally different than the rest of the album, so that's very interesting that you bring that up. Yeah,
they brought in Max Weinberg, who played drums on every other song, and Roy Bataan to be the piano player. And Weinberg actually said that there's some drumming parts on Born to Run that he was never able to replicate, so he just stopped trying to it. He kind of did his own like makeshift fill that was not even close to what was being done on the
It's funny
song.
you say that, because I definitely noticed that on that one, but I just thought, oh, Weinberg's doing something interesting. I had no idea, but that's interesting in hindsight. Yeah.
So Stevie Van Zandt was brought in to help with some arrangements of the horns, which he was able to do just by humming and singing the parts to the horn players. He instructed Springsteen to throw those sheets away. I'm going to tell them what to do.
Do you want to imitate Stevie Van Zandt humming the horns, Matt? Like what that might sound like?
I don't think I could do that.
It'd be awesome if you could.
Yeah. But he also, during this time, did what Springsteen credited him as his greatest achievement or greatest contribution to anything Springsteen ever did, because he helped solidify the guitar lick in the Born to Run song, which the iconic guitar riff that Springsteen said was basically Van Zandt's idea. So this was marketed, fairly heavily by Columbia Records. It was they gave a $250,000 marketing campaign. The album was an instant success. Time and Newsweek put Springsteen on the cover during the same week in October 1975. And Springsteen hated all of this attention and the promotion of the album. He goes to London. He sees a bunch of posters that say, quote, "Finally, the world is ready for Bruce Springsteen." And he proceeded to tear them all down and refused them to sell like these buttons that said, "I see the future. I have seen the future of rock and roll." He just didn't want that type of that type of promotion. Mm-hmm. Which it eventually the hype did die down, but he did develop a strong and fervent base. The album actually re-entered the charts in 1980 after the release of the double album The River, and again in 1985 after Born in the USA was released. And just a couple of reviews of this record before I get into your reactions. In a rave review for Rolling Stone magazine, Greil Marcus wrote that Springsteen enhances romanticized American themes with his majestic sound, ideal style of rock and roll, evocative lyrics, and an impassioned delivery that defines what is a magnificent album. It is the drama that counts, the stories. The stories that Springsteen is telling are nothing new, though no one else has ever told them better or made them matter more. And Robert Christgau of the Village Voice felt that he condenses a significant amount of American myth into his songs, mostly centered on taking a lover for a joyride, and often succeeds in spite of his tendency for histrionics and pseudo-tragic, beautiful loser fatalism. Springsteen may well turn out to be one of those rare self-conscious primitives who get away with it. So this is.
He wrote that in 1975.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
I don't know what year it says that you wrote it in. He's of the Village Voice.
Okay.
He might have.
Out.
I can look. Yeah. Born to Run. This is a massive album. This is the album that made Springsteen who he is today. Probably, I think that this is more in line with the stuff that he would do later on, and it saved his career. So, John, you're up first. What do you got on this?
I mean, yeah, this is a better version of Bruce Springsteen than Wild, Innocent, and the E Street. It's like if you took that album and put an editor. And I know there's legendary people who Jimmy Iovine and as you mentioned before just different people, his manager, right, Landau and stuff. You could tell there's people around here editing Bruce Springsteen a little bit because a lot of the essence of what Bruce Springsteen is there still, but it's refined enough that it doesn't become so excessive like it did for me in the Wild, Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. I think the only truly indulgent track is Jungle Land, which I know Springsteen aficionados love Jungle Land. To me, Jungle Land's like a return to sort of that overwrought, like just word salad, like just too long song. With that being said, it's the only time I feel like that happens. There's no song in my opinion, on Bruce Springsteen's first two albums that can even touch the 3, 4, 5 best songs on this album. Thunder Road's a great album opener. It's really like the best version of the Bruce Springsteen by numbers, that you can find, because it's not too long. It's got an undeniable chorus. It builds to that like end where he's just like blowing out the equivalent of like, he like, I always say he like blows out his songs, like he gets there and then at the end he sort of unloads everything, right? That's the Bruce Springsteen thing. Every song feels like it's built to be that thing where he jams out and the crowd like goes blissful, right? But Thunder Road, I always feel like, is where he nailed that best, and probably Born to Run in many ways is the second best version of that in many ways. And they're great compliments for each other, even though they're not next to each other. I don't know if Springsteen ever writes a Springsteen song any better than those two. Like he would write very many good songs down the road, but I don't know that sort of like the themes, right? Like the upbeat themes. Distillation. Like, yeah, it's just, I think that's where he just nails it twice, right? And then I mean, maybe Hungry Heart, maybe that's the other one, right, that you can make an argument for, in terms of that version. You know, the one I joked around before, like, you know, Southside Johnny and Go With Maria, and, you know, he loves his reference. He loves cars. I mean, my God, he writes about cars constantly. He writes about going on a drive or driving a car or stuff like that. He has like a weird idea of women still at this point, where it's like he talks about like meeting women like you're 14 years old. You know what I mean? Like you're, you know.
French kissing someone, but you're all right, and that's all right with me.
Well, that's a good line. That's a good line. I'm not saying he doesn't have good, and his phrasing is more sophisticated in this, and he doesn't just throw as many words as possible. He picks his words better, which is a huge plus on that. But a lot of it is like, you know, it's still at its core, and that's why the Chris Scott thing did make me laugh. It's a little bit of like, you know, Mary turned my phrase, you know, at this with her like silky red lips, and, you know, we got in the car, and, you know, it's still a lot of that where it's like, it's almost like a 50s version of like the world, kind of, which is always so weird because it's like distilled through 1975.
Yeah, it's like American Graffiti through Bruce Springsteen lens.
And that's kind of what it's always weird to me, because it sounds like a song that like Donovan would write in like the, you know, mid 60s, or even, I mean, and that's probably even like too late because he's got more hippie. Maybe not Don, Dion, right? Like The Wanderer, you know, like it's a lot of that type stuff. And I know they all love sort of that era of stuff, but there's a lot of that, so it doesn't always kind of connect with me. It's like you'd think that somebody in their mid-20s would be writing a little bit more about adult relationships, you know, as opposed to like Mary and Maria and, you know, that girl with the black hair down at, it just kind of, there's a little bit of that still. But I don't want to go too, because I do like this album. And I do think that I still will say that, you know, it's a simple thing, but I'll say Born to Run and Born in the USA are the two albums to start with if you need to find Springsteen, because he's got a lot of other great stuff in his catalog. But really, if you kind of want to know if you're going to like Springsteen or not, it's those two albums, right? It's just, outside of it, you're going to see, do I like a darker version of Springsteen or do I like a more excessive version of that music, you know? And then later career Springsteen is a whole different thing. But yeah, this album is, having listened to it so quickly, I don't think I've ever listened to The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle and Born to Run so close to each other before. But boy, you can really tell how much both the people around him helped refine him and how much he improved as a songwriter. Because instead of just using all the words, right, he used less words, but he used them more effectively. So his band sounds like the classic band here too. It doesn't. That's the other thing that really stood out to me, is his band sounded very different on the second. They were way more prominent to me outside of Springsteen. Springsteen, the first song was much more just the words, right? But the music was right up there with him. Here, I feel like Springsteen dominates the album a lot more, to be quite honest. And he seems like he has more presence on this album to me. It's definitely more produced, for sure. You can tell it was a huge budget because there's bells and whistles and there's a clean sound to this, right? That, you know, the guitar in particular comes real sharp in the album. So yeah, I would recommend this album, even if it does have some of the things that still makes me roll my eyes about Springsteen sometimes. But
this is like the classic Bruce Springsteen. So I feel like this is so like the man, the myth, the legend. It solidifies who he is, his like iconography in a way. Like I feel like this is on so many lists of the best classic rock albums. I feel like this is the one that everyone goes to. I feel like this was the one I was first exposed to, and it's a really solid album. It's really great, and there's so many great songs on it, but it's not even like my favorite Bruce Springsteen song. So I guess that's a testament, or album, so it's not even a testament to his discography. But it's got so all the hallmarks. That wall of sound comment that you made, Matt, is really interesting because that's totally dead on. The E Street Band is so like in your face in this on this album, and all of the songs I feel like start with like blaring multiple sounds, like you're getting pummeled with with guitars and like horns and stuff. And there's
Can I ask a question though? Because I kind of just couched this. I felt like I noticed the band more in the earlier album, even though the sounds are here. And the wall of sound thing is really interesting because that's actually how I heard this. Like the stuff kind of blends together into like a monolithic sound, but I didn't hear the drums and the individual instruments nearly as pronounced as I did in the earlier album. With the exception of maybe the beginning of 10th Avenue Freeze Out was the thing that most resembled the Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle musically to me. But I hear what you're saying too, because the instruments are loud on this album, but I don't know if they're as easy for me to differentiate on this album as they were on Wild, Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. But it sounds like you heard it differently.
Well, I agree with you. But I feel like that's kind of like the hallmark of what I think of as Bruce Springsteen is like everybody playing at once. And I agree. I wasn't really paying attention to if I could pick out the instruments. I just know that they're all there, like happening at once, and you're being assaulted with Bruce Springsteen with music, not in a bad way, but like like here it is, listen to it. And so yeah, his song, I feel like his songs either like start with the shot or like slowly build into that big like drop.
That's a great point, Josh. Yeah.
With the rest of the band, right? He like Thunder Road builds up with the guitars, and then it starts slowly, and then the horns come in, and then like it all hits you. Or then like 10th Avenue Freeze Out is the piano with the horns, or Born to Run starts with all of the like
machine gun drum,
the jingling and whatever is going on, sleigh bells or something, and then Jungle Land is the same way. I think that's a great way to end an album. It's probably like one of the best enders because it's just like this huge. There's so much grandiosity to Bruce Springsteen in a way, and his production, and that really works for me. I feel like that's why people love him so much, is because it gets you excited in a way. And people love. The other thing I noticed on this album is that they are really good songs to sing to, and I think that's like half of what people love about Bruce Springsteen is just like feeling like you're part of the E Street Band and singing along and feeling that energy. And he really conveys that, and obviously conveys that in his live shows as well. And this is what he's all about. And it's hard to deny that and not appreciate that in my mind and enjoy this album. It's a really strong album too. It's concise. The least favorite song on the album for me is She's the One, but everyone else is like I really enjoy listening to and singing along to and paying attention to. That's the other thing. Sometimes I don't even know what he's singing about. It's like a Bruce Springsteen meme generator, right? You could just like put random phrases together and sing it in Bruce Springsteen's voice, and that's like what one of the songs sounds like. I noticed that with 10th Avenue Freeze Out.
I could give you some lyrics I wrote down at the end, Josh. I'll save them for you.
Yeah, I'm like, what is this song about? It's like, what's a freeze out?
He doesn't even know.
Yeah.
He admitted. I saw a documentary. He goes, what's a 10th Avenue Freeze Out? I don't even know.
See, it's like, it doesn't matter because you're just like in it and enjoying it.
But it could just as easily be, there was this time when these cars went down to the middle of the road and everybody would yell, freeze out, and then Johnny would say, whoa, freeze it out. It's like, that's what I always think of with those songs. You know what I mean? I don't even know if it happened, but
But this is absolutely, I feel like, where you start with Bruce Springsteen, and like John says, you go from there. I think Born in the USA is probably like every song on there, as I've told you guys before, is like amazing and so catchy and indelible, and I really like Nebraska a lot. I feel like that's such a change of pace, and it's really good. And I even like Tunnel of Love and some of these other ones that come later. Darkness on the Edge of Town I really like. So yeah, I mean, this is a great album. It's undeniable. If you don't like this, then I don't think you really like Bruce Springsteen. I mean, there's no way around it. Like you have to. This is what he's all about. Is my point.
So this is, I mean, I don't know if we've covered a better album this decade, I love this record. I think that this starts out with probably Thunder Road might be my favorite Springsteen song, and one of my top. That's a top song of all time for me. It's just it's so good. It's such a beautiful beginning with the slow piano, and that's what I got to start off with saying. The piano parts in here stick out to me. Almost probably more than any other instrument. The Roy Battan's piano playing on here is phenomenal. It's really backed into the 10th Avenue freeze out. What's going on there? The piano part at the beginning of Backstreets is beautiful. It's just so well done. The piano in Jungle Land is phenomenal. Like the stuff that he's doing all throughout the song, but particularly the end, he's just going ape shit on the piano, and just love the piano playing here overall. But Thunder Road opens this record, and it's just an absolute classic. And it's bookended. I absolutely disagree with Jungle Land, John's take on Jungle Land. I get it's verbose, it's ridiculous. Springsteen's ridiculous. I mean, let's just say that he's kind of a ridiculous person. And if you see him interviewed, which I did see there is a documentary on Wings to Wheels or Wings on Wheels or whatever. This is the name of the documentary from like 10 years ago about the making of this record. And to hear him, there's so many scenes where he's just sitting there and he's got a guitar in his hand, he's looking at it and he's telling you this like, so yeah, when I did this song, it's about put all the passion and the joy and the anger and the frustration, and he's just using all these adjectives, and he's like, it's like, all right, dude, come on, I know it's like, but he can get away with this stuff because, damn it, he makes a kick-ass rock and roll album.
He sells it.
He totally does, and he makes you believe it, and he can. It's like what Chris Cowett said. He said he can be ridiculous, and get away with it. It's exactly right. But Jungle Land musically it's phenomenal. I get chills still listening to it. The saxophone part, the Clarence Clemens saxophone part, and the mid part of that is just is stellar, right? And it's just the way that it builds and the way that it's so good. So to me, these bookends of this album, the first and last tracks, might be the best of any album that I can think of for me personally. You're just getting two of his best tracks.
Definitely an argument can be made for that.
Yeah, that's in the conversation for me for sure. So I don't know, and then Born to Run's that's the song, right? He always plays that song. That's the song what he's most well known for. I can't believe it took them 6 months to do that, but like the production, I never thought of this as a wall of sound record. Like that term never came up in my mind listening to this. But
he loves Spector. I know that because he always talks about Phil Spector.
Yeah, and when it's one of those things when someone says it and then you listen to it and you're like, yeah, that's very true. It's like this is a very full album. The one song that stands out a little bit off from that is Meeting Across the River, which is like it kind of seems a little out of place, but I still kind of like it. It's like this noir kind of like, I don't know, again, back in time kind of like a James Cagney kind of thing, movie scene or whatever. But really well done. I disagree. I think She's the One is a great song. You got that Bo Diddley jam, and it rocks out. It's just a great, fun, feel-good album that I don't care what he is singing about. If you make music like this, sing about whatever you want to. I don't care because it sounds awesome.
Well, you can't care because it's absurd.
Yeah,
if you listen to his lyrics.
Yeah, this is what I'm looking for in music. This is why I don't care about lyrics, because if you can have music do this, it just sends chills down your spine, years and years after hearing it for the first time, and just getting so much energy out of it and so much into it, like I do. It doesn't matter because this is rock and roll. He is like one of the best artists that I've ever seen live, probably the best artist I've ever seen live. And this album is going to easily be in my top 10, I would say, for the 70s. This is like a deserted island album for me. Like this is like one of the albums that I would take with me that I would just always want to listen to and never get sick of. So this classic record, it's a huge step up for me from what he did with The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. There was plenty of moments where I'm going to roll my eyes a lot more on that record because the music isn't there, right? But he gets the music to back up whatever he wants to write about cars and girls and, whatever. Getting out of here. I mean, this whole album is about, I need to get free and get out of, that's why I was wondering about Freehold. It sounds like a shithole because all he wants to do is get out of there. But, but the music just backs up everything, and when you see him do it live, he makes you a believer, So this is a phenomenal record for me.
Yeah.
Is there like I always I always remember watching I don't know why you'll laugh at this probably, but like I remember watching the night when like AOC beat that guy in the primary, right? Mm-hmm. And he played Born to Run like as his walk-off song, and I forget who it was, but who played it and said, this is like perfect, isn't it, in some ways, like, you know, in terms of, and I remember laughing because it's like, I don't know if you can make a more boomer album than this. And I don't say that negatively either. Like, this is like, I don't know what it is, but it hits a certain sentimentality for a certain type of white person that I feel like it is like, it gets to that level, like where Matt is explaining it, where it's almost like a religious experience. That's always been a really interesting thing for me about Springsteen, because I heard it in Josh too, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've never experienced Springsteen that way. Like, I absolutely recognize this is a step up. I would recommend this album. I enjoy Springsteen as a performer and can recognize him and stuff, but there is a part of me that, like, I feel like your personality kind of has to jive with this, because like, it's so weird, Springsteen, like, the human, and then Springsteen, like, the lyricist and musician, because Springsteen, the human, is this oddly progressive, like, not he's progressive, he's forward looking, you know, he's like, you feel like he's one of the few guys who's aged and not been like, oh, these young upstarts. You just get the feel he go like, oh, I love these, I'll play with anybody, you know, stuff like, which is so not what, like, sometimes his audience is, which is basically this very nostalgic, like, play the shit I want to hear, like, type. And it's always been a really weird dichotomy of going to a Springsteen show where most of the people are just sitting waiting for a song like Jungle Land to come on, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, and Springsteen will still play it because the showman in Springsteen completely understands and can get in that headspace. But the second he's off the stage, I don't think Bruce Springsteen connects to, like, the song Jungle Land. I don't even think he connected to, like, Wild Innocent and the E Street Shuffle by the time he was made, because you can tell he's moving on from those characters to some degree. And so it's really an interesting thing of, like, Springsteen, the showman, can just get into the space where he can bust out, like, Rosalita or Jungle Land and Thunder Road while, like, not even remotely being the human being that, like, that. It's just, and the crowd, like, and that's why you see so many people, I think, that are, like, just baffled by Springsteen's personal politics, because the Springsteen they get is, like, how they perceive his lyrics, because it's so nostalgic and shit, and, like, he's not that at all in real. It's just the most fascinating thing to me in the world is the mix between that and, like, him as a person. So and
this record I think really resonated with people lyrically, because it's all about, like, it's universal themes of, like, of freedom. I got to get out of here, right? I got to make something out of my life. I got to turn things around, and
Born to Run, for God's sakes, is the name of the album. So it's
and those are the themes throughout pretty much most of these songs, right? Like, it's just like this getting out and this having freedom and detaching yourself from what was holding you back and all that stuff.
But then the dude's next album's called Darkness on the Edge of Town. So like, I always thought, like, don't people kind of get what he's kind of saying here? You know, like, it's kind of, you know, once you get that freedom, you know, you go from Wild and the Innocent and the E Street Shuffle to, like, Born to Run to, like, I mean, he kind of takes you there. You know what I mean? Like, it's that's what's always interesting to me. He leaves breadcrumbs.
But again, what I'm getting out of it is not, the reason I get so passionate and into it is not because of the message. It's because of the feeling and the sound.
I get you. Yes.
So, and I guess maybe if you're singing about getting away and, like, Born to Run, like, you're going to belt that out even louder.
Oh, yeah. It fits.
Yeah.
There's a desperation that fits. Yeah.
But it's just like, yeah, man, he's got this palpable energy. And like I said, he's kind of a ridiculous person, but he's a very fascinating figure, because he does things that 99.9% of other artists, there's no way you're going to be able to get away with some of the stuff that he does.
I think why he's
genuine.
I think why he's not ridiculous to me is because, once again, I know people like him. Like, he's my Uncle Pete. You know, like, when you say, like, Pete, what's going on? And it's like, oh, you know, I was down at the bar the other day, and, you know, at the bar I met up with Johnny and stuff, and then I had to make a phone call. So, and it's like, I like, know people know people like this. So I guess if you see it, it's not as ridiculous, because you're just sort of like, at its heart, it's sort of like a everyman working class where you sort of downplay. I mean, even the story you told, right, about how he perceive, it's like you don't, you know, where he's from and working class even, you downplay, you know, self-pride and stuff. You have ambition, right, but you kind of, the script, right, is you downplay it. You know, you never want to seem too intellectual or too uppity or too, and so, like, and I think that's what people like about him, you know what I mean? That he doesn't, you know, he's grandiose, but also projects being humble at the same time, which is an interesting line to walk. Yeah, and only a certain people can walk that line.
Yeah, but he has no problem at the same time talking about himself and talking about the music that he wrote, you know, and when he does it in this really passionate, like, emotional way. That is kind of like, you know, a lot of artists are like, too, like, I don't want to talk about this, you know, it's like it's too personal or whatever, but he's got this.
He's accessible.
But
in
his
that way.
stories, like, when I see Springsteen give interviews, it's always like, you know, when I was growing up, I used to like to watch the Ed Sullivan Show on TV, and it really transfixed it. It made me feel like he doesn't really go like, you know, Tunnel of Love's about the breakup of his marriage, right? And like but he rarely ever goes into like, I wrote these songs because of that. You know what I mean? It's more like that, like you even said, it's kind of like, it usually is like, you know, I tried to capture the spirit of what it felt like to be a 16-year-old kid in that car, and all I could think of was getting on the highway, and, you know, and I laugh, but like, that's, I think he keeps a distance to a lot of stuff.
It's
and he
ideas.
almost leaves clues. He leaves clues as well, where it's sort of like, you can connect with me and you can let the story be your own, which I think is why so many people have heard it one way. And I always wonder, like, when Springsteen wrote these things, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's kind of, he's so genuine. He's like, you take it and you do what you want with it. But I'm always like, I wonder how many people are hearing it the way that Springsteen actually in his core intended it, because I know there's something behind. You can't write as many words as he does and not have, you know, something behind it.
Well, isn't it like an interesting, funny example of that is when, you know, politicians always misappropriate Born in the USA and make it like this anthem when it's really about like the Vietnam War. It's like people will just project whatever they want onto a Bruce Springsteen song because they like love the power and like the passion that he has.
Well, but people can hear a song like Glory Days and think it's like something that's positive, you know, when it's absolutely like shitting all over like nostalgia to some degree. Right. But you can hear it as like, oh man, me and my buddies. And Springsteen lets you have either. Right, you know what I mean? It can be that for you, or it could be, you know, you can hear Hungry Heart, you know what I mean, as a stadium anthem, or you can hear it as like a really depressing song that sounds like somebody's about to commit suicide, which is how I've always heard that song. So, and I mean, that's where I give Springsteen credit, you know what I mean? He can evoke a feeling that can be what you need it to be. And I think that's why it's funny that we all like this album, but for different reasons. And that's why I gotta give the man the credit. So.
Well, we're gonna get a lot more into pretty much all those albums that you mentioned earlier, Josh. We're gonna cover, except we're not doing Tunnel of Love, I don't think.
The one final thing I thought of is like, this is kind of, in terms of famous albums, I feel like this is on the level of like Dark Side of the Moon and Led Zeppelin 4 and like some of those other like you know, Hotel California later on in the show. Down the road, like I feel like it's on that level in terms of like famous, like this is the album of the artist if you wanted to know the artist and things.
Well, if you're talking about sales, you have to go with Born in the USA, probably, right? Like that. I think that was the one that really. I mean, this one certainly, you know, started his career, you know, to what it was. But Born in the USA was the one that like made him, like, when you thought of the 80s artists, like in mid 80s, there was like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Bruce Springsteen were like the three, you know, main ones. Maybe Prince too, you know, but like of like these huge iconic band artists that were just like massive sellers and drawers at concerts.
So here's another interesting question for you. Did the Bruce Springsteen of this era, did he lead to like, what's his descendants? Because we've been talking a lot of bands recently, right? And
Gaslight Anthem.
Well, like, I mean, that's almost like a cover band. You know, I'm talking like, you know, we just like today, right? We did Kraftwerk, right? And Kraftwerk had descendants, and they went, you know, we talked to, you know, the JM, you know what I mean? And
right.
stuff like that. And then there's like Big Star, which clearly came from somewhere, but also clearly led somewhere, right? And so I was trying to think of that, like in that context, like who, you know,
like who names,
like Hold Steady, like basically all these groups from New Jersey, right? Who as much are appropriating the vibe.
Who names Bruce Springsteen as an influence is basically what you're asking.
Well, lots of people will say they like him and elements of it, but like, what's the sonic? Because that's where another thing. It's like Bruce Springsteen comes from the past, right? But I don't know if he led it to somewhere new, and that's not a knock, but that's an interesting thing. Because in the 70s, right around this time, we're seeing all of these new musics. And Springsteen's kind of like a revivalist in some ways. He's Dylan and Van Morrison, but also 50s rock and roll, right? That's what he is.
Yeah, and he did it in his own way, you know, like his own sound. But yeah, that's, I don't know. I'm just looking at. I just googled it. Googled it. So you've got stuff like.
Oh, you're cheating.
Yeah, I am. Well, okay. Well, you go ahead. Name some more, because I already named a couple, but
I mean,
they're all rock bands.
There's a version. There's a version you could say somebody like, you know, John Mellencamp, but he's not aping this Bruce Springsteen. He's aping like a later version, and not even truly aping. But you got what I'm saying? He's aping like a later version of it.
Yeah.
This Springsteen. Like, but, you know, I know you like somebody like Frank Turner, right? And that's not even an exact, like, that's kind of somebody like that sort of anthemic, but that also comes from a different place too, you know.
But don't you have to think of like, because I think of Bruce Springsteen's influence being live performances and concerts that are just like 3.5 hours long that most people don't do. These big anthemic.
But who does that? Like Bon Jovi does that, and they're influenced by Bruce Springsteen because they grew up in New Jersey and the legend.
But just anybody that just aspires to put it all out on this, like to recognize that the fans have paid a lot of money. Like, I am here to take them to this other place. And
but that's James Brown, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying he's in the tradition of like that, you know, and the showmanship. And I'm not saying it's bad. And you're right, he's incredible. But what I'm saying is like he's an evolution, but it's rare you see somebody who's an evolution, but then you don't see what came later. So that's where it's like, is Springsteen sort of the end of that like thing, and then it just moved in a different direction? Is that
that's a good question?
Even Springsteen moved away from being Springsteen after a while.
It's almost like Andrew WK is like an extreme example.
Well, energy. I mean, he's got to save. I don't know anything else besides that.
But I don't know about the performance, the live show aspect. That's a good point. But yeah, who else brings that energy?
I know I've seen a lot of shows. I haven't seen many like that. You know, I mean, so yeah, he's not breaking down a ton of barriers musically or creatively the way that like he's not experimenting in the studio. Time. He did a lot in the studio here, but it wasn't anything that was like, holy crap, what is this instrument or what is this?
He's kind of got the vibe of like a great singer, right? Like, you know, Aretha Franklin, or like if you see like Mary J. Blige, right? Like go ape shit, you know, like, and I mean, that's kind of in some ways the corollary, right? Someone who you're just like, my God, like I just use Mary J. Blige, but that's like a person who every time I see them perform live, I'm like, oof, she's feeling something at a level that like I don't, you know, and I wonder if that's a little bit, you know, the heritage of black music, you know what I mean? And then the later leg, because that was all about the live performance, right? You know, and basically.
Yeah, and I'd say that in the way that he connects with people, and the way that he, you know, just because people, there's a level of fandom with an artist like Springsteen that fewer other artists don't have that, at least not on that scale. You know, you're probably always going to, like we always said, there's always somebody's band is your, like the guy that I know who's better than Ezra's his favorite band. Like everybody's going to love a certain band or artist, but like the amount of people that love him the way that they do is a little bit more unique, I would say.
It's not often you see it like in his realm, because you see it with like a Kiss, right? Somebody like, or Grateful Dead. It's not like people that, you know, have devoted fan base who will see him, you know, 50 times, right? And stuff like that. And that's the type of thing that Springsteen has.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So, well, we're gonna get a lot more. We'll have this will be more to go. I think we have like 4 or 5 other Springsteen albums to cover. So, but I think this is good for now. I think we're all thumbs up on this. For different reasons, as John said, but still thumbs up. Yeah, check this out if you haven't. This is a classic, all-time classic record. God,
you can't tell the story of '70s music without this. That's a no doubter.